Everyone to the homelessness webinar being run this afternoon. My name is Adrian Sell. I am Chief Executive of Oxfordshire Community Foundation. I will be, interestingly, job sharing the role this afternoon, as this is a joint webinar hosted by us and Oxfordshire Homeless Movement, but more on that in short order. As Kate said, if you can make sure you're muted, that would be very helpful. If you're able to change your display name to reflect who you are and the organisation you're representing, that would also help us keep track on who's attending and what level of interest we've got from different sectors. And as you probably know by now, these webinars are recorded and then published on our website later, so people can catch up if they're not able to attend on the day. And finally, to say there is a chat box, of course, on Zoom. Please do use it to introduce yourself, to make comments or to ask questions. And there should be some time for a Q&A later on. So Oxfordshire Community Foundation, it was proud to be one of the instigators and initiators of Oxfordshire Homeless Movement, along with a range of other organisations, which was set up, now I don't know how long ago, but I think 3 or 4 years ago, in the face of long-standing homelessness issues across Oxfordshire and particularly in Oxford City. Now, the count at the end of 2020 showed that there were 45 people rough sleeping across the county. This was a significant decrease on a year earlier, largely on account of the Everyone In campaign and huge amount of work that went in to try and find homes for everyone at the start of the pandemic. But as you probably know, that 45 is very much the tip of a very, very large iceberg. And if you dig below that, you find a lot of people who are rough sleeping, a lot of hidden homelessness, a lot of people who are sofa surfing. And at the root of all of that, of course, is the very high housing costs we know exist in Oxford and Oxfordshire more widely, and the lack of affordable housing and the lack of available housing for people who are on low incomes, which is an ongoing problem in the county, and something that Oxfordshire Homeless Movement is aiming to try and address in a variety of ways. Next slide, please. So as I said, OCF and Oxfordshire Homeless Movement are jointly presenting today's webinar. And I will be handing over in due course to Neil Preddy, who is one of my trustees at Oxfordshire Community Foundation, but also Vice Chair of Oxfordshire Homeless Movement. Now, Oxfordshire Homeless Movement has a vision of everyone getting off the streets and having a roof over their heads and a place to call home in Oxfordshire. And it aims to bring together a huge and diverse sector to work in a coordinated way across the county. And there are 2 particular areas that OHM is focusing on, mostly around gaps in provision of statutory services, and in particular, people who have no resource to public funds. And Neil is going to pick up a lot more on that in the discussion later. And the second area is the voices of those with lived experience of homelessness. And if you attended our webinar last October, where we talked about homelessness, we had a presentation there from someone with lived experience of homelessness. And there's a project there to make sure that people who have that experience have a voice and influence in how housing is provided in the county. Next slide. And OCF, as part of our ongoing work to help the sector respond to the pandemic and the lockdowns, has just opened a homelessness grants round, picking up on the priorities that are identified by Oxfordshire Homeless Movement and focusing on trying to tackle the causes of homelessness and move on housing. And do go to our normal place on our website for more details of that, and I would encourage you to have a look and apply. We have a range of speakers today. In a moment, I will be handing over to Dr. Lígia Teixeira, who's Chief Executive at the Centre for Homelessness Impact, who's going to be talking about the broader picture regarding homelessness in the county and more broadly. After that, I'll have a short conversation with Gillian Douglas, who's Assistant Director of Housing and Social Care Commissioning at Oxfordshire County Council. After that, I will then be handing over to Neil Preddy, who will be hosting a discussion with a number of people from the local sector. Naveed Fazi, who's Director of Services at Asylum Welcome, Amy Delissa, who's Director and Deputy CEO at Connection Support, and Paul Roberts, who's CEO at Aspire Oxford. And finally, at the end, there should be time for a short Q&A. So as I say, please do post questions or comments in the chat box as we go through. So first, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Dr. Lígia Teixeira. And if you could unmute yourself and give us the benefit of your wisdom, please.
Thank you very much, Adrian. First of all, congratulations to you and the Oxford Homeless Movement for putting together this event, and most importantly, your incredible efforts in the most difficult of times. It's been truly inspiring to follow your journey in the past 2 years and to play a small role in it. So I was delighted to be asked to comment on developments in Oxfordshire and the role of evidence and data within those efforts. The Centre for Homelessness Impact is an independent organisation that supports the use of reliable data and evidence in bringing about a sustainable end to homelessness. We support leaders and organisations in homelessness and related fields to make evidence-led decisions and adopt evidence-led practices to maximise positive impact in their work. So since launching 3 years ago, we have engaged in a whirlwind of activity towards this end, including the publication of our book, Using Evidence to End Homelessness, and more recently our campaign, Ended with Evidence, which advocates for a new culture of evidence-mindedness in local areas across the UK. So I'm pleased to say that the Oxfordshire Homeless Movement, as it is now, was knocking at our door from day one. Despite all this great work and significant investment in tackling homelessness over the years, despite of all of that, many people remained without a home. So one thing was certain to the people who talked to us then: there was a lot to be proud of, but good was no longer good enough. It became clear that it was time for a new approach, because if you kept doing the same things with the same people, with the same worldviews, same disciplines, social backgrounds and life experiences, what would the next decade look like? So soon after that, obviously the pandemic erupted in the UK, and policymakers and practitioners and campaigners alike feared that a catastrophic outbreak among people experiencing homelessness would happen. But obviously, where you are and in local areas across the UK, people listened to the evidence and responded to the pandemic at speed. A raft of emergency measures were introduced to strengthen the welfare safety net in light of COVID. And as of January 2021, more than 26,000 people had been helped into settled housing or supported accommodation, and over 11,000 are still in self-contained emergency accommodation, which is fantastic. In Oxfordshire itself, street homelessness has more than halved between 2017 and 20. So in fact, the numbers are at their lowest since 2012, which is fantastic. The number of households in temporary accommodation, though, have increased by 10%, and similar to other parts in England, in fact. So while this highlights the fantastic work that's been done, there is also a growing awareness that the crisis is almost certainly still deepening around us, and that desire to do more. 86% of people across the UK, the public, consider homelessness to be a serious problem, and only 4% expect it to decrease in the next 12 months. So it's a situation that people are concerned about in the field, but the public is also certainly taking this a lot more seriously. So evidence-informed action is as needed now as it was back in March. So this makes developments in Oxfordshire, I guess, especially significant to me. Your commitment to move away from the current homelessness system and replace it by a model where people are rehoused in settled mainstream housing as quickly as possible is timely, as it is groundbreaking. So congratulations. At the Centre, we've seen firsthand how COVID-19 is changing communities' approach to homelessness across the UK, but as yet you are one of a handful of local areas making a public commitment to design out emergency accommodation locally. So the evidence certainly suggests that moving people into settled accommodation quickly is a desirable outcome in itself, and may have other impacts like reducing repeat homelessness and improving employment and income, health and well-being, educational attainment of children, and many, many other things. So today, I would like, if I might, just share three or four things that I urge you heed as you embark on the next phase of your work in Oxfordshire. First, moving towards a housing-led system is the right evidence-led thing to do, but it won't be easy. You need to oversee the delivery of a significant commitment and the time pressure for a population that is insufficiently understood by current data collection systems and with insufficient reliable evidence of what works, with whom, at what costs. So really important to focus on that. Also remember that in 2018 the Scottish Government pledged to move away from the current homelessness system and replaced it by a model where people are rehoused in settled mainstream housing as quickly as possible. So a very similar vision. Despite this commitment, there are still unanswered questions though about what is meant by transitioning to rapid rehousing and how to track progress towards that goal. So these challenges are relevant to what you're trying to do in Oxfordshire. Second, the point I wanted to bring up is the need, the imperative, in light of what I just said, to start with a clear definition of what success looks like. How will Oxfordshire be different in 10 years as a result of the things you are putting in place today? What will that move towards a housing-led system actually look like? With this foundation in place, a clear definition, you can then start developing metrics that allow the gathering of performance data and the setting of targets and trajectories. A lot is known, as it happens, about the evidence behind the successful delivery of policy commitments, and these two strategies are key, as are maintaining routines such as reports, stocktakes, assessments, that support and enable dialogues around progress and around the resolution of problems, because there are always some. Moving on to my next point. So thirdly, alongside these performance management disciplines, successful delivery of your vision will also require insight into what statutory and non-profit organizations in your system need to do and how to do it in order to generate required results cost effectively. And it also requires sector capacity to adopt evidence-based interventions and practice. So for this, greater experimentation is needed. Surprisingly, little empirical evidence exists. And even if something works, because quite a few of the things we do work, other things may work better and may be more cost effective. So for instance, food banks, free school meals, they're all helping people in crisis, but are they really solving hunger? They aren't. So while simple interventions may actually, other simple interventions may actually help address those things even better. We just don't know yet, but that's where we also need to put some effort. So we can be doing more as a result of with limited resources. The other thing that is clearly an opportunity area is the private rented sector, and what can be done to essentially work more closely with landlords to ensure that more properties are actually released faster, as you know, highlighted in some of our recent trials. But finally, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that the importance of supporting leaders at all levels in Oxfordshire, organisations as well as communities and neighbourhoods, to help them understand the problem of homelessness, and also to then harness the power of data and evidence in order to achieve your goals. So take, for instance, the huge perception challenge we face. According to our recent Ipsos Mori survey, the public believe that 11% of adults in the UK are currently homeless. So that's a huge misperception. The reality is closer to 0.5%. People are as well much more accurate when it comes to guessing the number of people living in poverty or housing costs. So something, you know, needs to be done about that. It is, however, encouraging that 86% of the public agree that homelessness is a serious problem, and 71% say that not enough attention is being paid to it, and they want evidence-led solutions to to drive decisions rather than the opinion of even experts. So to help address these and the wider issues I've touched upon, that's the reason why we've launched the End It With Evidence campaign, because at this time of great change, we need to fully embrace experimentation and evidence-led innovations, as you're doing in Oxfordshire. So the campaign calls on all of us to first build the evidence of the policies, practices and programs that achieve the most effective results to improve the lives of people who are homeless or at risk. Second, that we build the capacity needed to act promptly on the best knowledge available to improve decisions and help limited resources go further. And finally, that we use evidence-led communications to change the conversation on homelessness, challenge stereotypes, and make sure that homelessness is not a defining factor in anyone's life. So just to conclude, looking back over the past few decades, it's possible to identify some of what is needed for us to defeat homelessness sustainably in the UK. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and certainly you do in Oxfordshire, and we are doing really well in comparison to other countries. But the solutions of the past will never be the solutions of the future. And for instance, the systems and services of the last 20 years are rightly criticised for allowing too little agency to individuals experiencing homelessness, and for wrongly and inappropriately blaming them if they don't engage. So it seems to us that the pattern of support for the future will need to work much more closely with people experiencing homelessness as partners in identifying solutions alongside mainstream services, communities, neighbourhoods and families. So there is no doubt that there is still a lot of work to do and big challenges to face. But Oxfordshire is certainly heading in the right direction with a focus on transitioning towards housing-led solutions, and with continued support and collaboration across all levels, and an even greater focus on having the right tools and data in place. I am confident that you can continue on the evidence-led road to ending homelessness for good in Oxfordshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Lígia. Thank you. That was really interesting combination of evidence and data and information, and a huge amount of passion for ending homelessness, which I think is really important, and good to hear that where Oxfordshire is blazing a trail that other areas will be able to follow. Gillian Douglas, would you like to unmute yourself, and we will move on to Oxfordshire County Council. And we know that there's been, huge change in innovation over the last year, 15 months through the pandemic. It'd be really good to hear something from a council perspective about how things are working differently.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, so I actually work for the County Council half of the time and Cherwell District half of the time. And I think that's quite a unique role in terms of being able to see what part both tiers of local government should be playing in preventing and tackling homelessness. So I'm not here, just to speak as Gillian Douglas, but to speak on behalf of the partnership really of the 6 councils, because obviously the City Council invests the most and has the biggest resources going into tackling homelessness. I think it's really important for all of us who work in local government to be those agents of change and to be advocates for doing more on homelessness. I think in the past there has been an assumption that a county council might do a bit of the commissioning, but beyond that, housing is the responsibility of districts and city council. And so, we've been on a mission to break down those barriers, because homelessness, yes, people do need to be rapidly rehoused and need to be able to build their lives, rebuild their lives in settled accommodation, but it's also very much a health, a social care and a well-being issue that cuts across all of those services, because we can't just be finding the housing solution, we need to find the support and in many cases the care that people will need to sustain them going forward and to be able to live independently. So I think that's been very important. I do think that homelessness is a very unifying subject, as Lígia has alluded to, because although the political makeup of the county council has just changed quite radically, I think all parties recognise the importance of tackling homelessness. If 86% of the public are exercised about it, then of course we need to see housing as a human right, as something that isn't acceptable. But that does mean lobbying and campaigning around structural change, because we know welfare reform is still impacting negatively on people. No recourse to public funds is an extreme structural barrier for local authorities in helping people. But I am more optimistic because of everyone in, because that shows that when you're given the mandate and some of your rules and regulations are stripped away, we can act very swiftly and very cohesively. And in fact, over 500 people have been accommodated across Oxfordshire during that period. The challenge is now, is everybody being helped into sustainable long-term accommodation, even if they're not 100% tenancy ready, but can be tenancy supported, as Crisis have named it. We are moving through the recommissioning to a housing-led approach, but it is a work in progress. We cannot claim success because we're currently in a live situation where we're inviting alliances of providers to come forward and tell us how they would deliver the outcomes, rather than us saying, we need 100 beds of this and 50 beds of that. So there'll be much more of a focus on models like Housing First. There is a requirement for the districts in the city to be changing policy so that we can help more people into social housing, rather than saying, sorry, you've got a history of rent arrears, antisocial behaviour, mental ill health, you are not the right kind of tenant for social housing. So we either don't let you on our register, or the register provider has to then reject you. So this is not about saying the voluntary and community sector will have to do it all in delivering the outcomes. This is saying there's as much structural, cultural change needed in the public sector to galvanise us and make this work together.
Thank you. And I think that was really powerful, explaining why support and housing are so important hand in hand. And just reasonably quickly, if you could just talk about, what more is needed from the voluntary sector and how Oxfordshire Homelessness Movement is helping from your perspective.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say was, we as local authorities, I speak for Cherwell and the county, we haven't been good at involving people of lived experience, in the sense of, listening to survivors of homelessness. And I think consulting on the county-wide strategy has been a good catalyst for listening to people more. And I know the LEAF group is engaged with Oxfordshire Homeless Movement, and the fact that the movement has been willing to move beyond Oxford to say this is a county-wide initiative, that although homeless is lower volume out in the districts, actually if we want to balance supply and demand of housing better to meet the highest priorities, then we do need to work county-wide, because some of the solutions do lie in the districts, even if the person didn't originate from that district. So, I mean, personally, I've been really impressed by the way that, people with lived experience are coming forward, are having more of a voice. The fact that the movement can probably say the things, be challenging, move into domains of activity that the public sector can't, either because it's, we're following certain regulations, or we're too bureaucratic, or actually as public sector workers, we've just got a mindset that doesn't make us maybe always as free and creative as we could be. So I think it's really healthy to have that challenge, and also to harness the power of the general public, because a lot of people want something done about homelessness. And of course, they see rough sleepers as the most visible manifestation, but actually a lot of the homelessness is hidden, is emerging. We could do better on prevention. So I think public awareness, education, campaigning, we need to educate our new political leads also. In some of the meetings I'm in, some of the language that is used by officers comes from a place of lacking the evidence base and not hearing about the experience directly. So we hear things like rough sleeping is a lifestyle choice. People are unhousable, things that do need to be unpicked and challenged, and we need to find a way through. So I think it's great that the movement, the voluntary and community sector and the public sector can all complement each other in terms of finding these solutions together, which sounds a bit trite, but actually that's the reality. We can't do it on our own. We need to expand our thinking. We need to be more creative. We need to be challenged, because very often that's where you get the change. You know, when Crisis first came in to do the research, and I've worked in homelessness for a few years, I was sort of choking on the housing-led model, thinking, how is this possible? We still need supported housing at scale. But actually the evidence base is showing us that we're not going to give up supported housing 100%, because some people need that for recovery and may need it quite long term in some cases. But we've got the balance wrong, and we do need to shift more to rapid rehousing. So I think having these complementary agencies working on homelessness is a really good foundation for future success.
Great. Thank you, Gillian. Really, really good to hear that. Really good to hear an endorsement of the voluntary sector from the statutory sector, because it, you know, relationships aren't always easy, but I think homelessness in Oxfordshire is one area where there's a really, really strong partnership being formed. Before I hand over to Neil Preddy, I just wanted to quickly acknowledge the huge amount of work that's been done by a member of my team. I'm not going to name her because she'll probably kill me for what I'm saying anyway, but to just underpin and help Oxfordshire Homeless Movement come together and coalesce so effectively. And also to thank, again, without naming, the trust that underpins financially the work of the Oxfordshire Homeless Movement, because it is absolutely critical. Without that financial underpinning and without that incredible staff member, we wouldn't be able to do the work we do. So I just wanted to end with that thank you before handing over to Neil Preddy, who is Vice Chair of Oxfordshire Homeless Movement.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And those two pieces we just had were a great introduction to what I'm going to talk about now with some of the project providers. We've heard about everyone in, and the need now is that the emergency accommodation comes to an end to find move-on accommodation for people, and how that's been quite successful with a large number of people already, and it's a big focus for the councils. One of the key features of everyone in was that it meant everyone. So we were able to cover everybody regardless of their status in our society. As we look to move on accommodation, that no longer applies. So there is this category of people, some of them are in the emergency accommodation now, who the council is not able to serve because they're not permitted to. So this is this group of people in the jargon called no recourse to public funds, or NRPF. And so as a homeless movement, we kind of identified this as a gap that the voluntary sector can really step up and make an effort to fill. And that's what we've done, trying to work with these people to try to get as close to the overall strategy as possible. We're taking a housing-led approach with these people and provide a package for them that consists of somewhere to live, support where they need it, and immigration advice. And to do that, we've got three great organisations running that project. They are Connection Support, and today here we've got a Director and Deputy CEO of Connection Support, Amy DeLissa, is with us. Aspire, who many of you will know, are helping us with getting accommodation set up. So Paul Roberts, the CEO of Aspire, joins us as well. And then on the immigration support side, and actually supporting some of these people already through their connections, is Asylum Welcome. And Almas Fazi from Asylum Welcome joins us. He's the frontline services manager there. Most of you will know him as Naveed. Naveed is a bit like a South American footballer. It just has one name and everybody knows exactly who you mean. So I'm going to turn to you first, Naveed, and ask you a question, so if you want to get unmuted and ready. Just tell us a bit more about this term NRPF. What does NRPF mean, and what difficulties does somebody with that label face?
Hello, Neil. Lovely seeing you all. And I just wanted to start thanking Oxford Homeless Movement and OCF with regard to taking this wise and human approach with regard to homelessness. And I think in many ways, the current project we got labeled NRPF, it's unique across the United Kingdom. And I'm so pleased and that I am a part of this, which means that I have been working with migrants and refugees in this country for 25 years, actually, since I came to this country, in London, in other parts of the country, and now in Oxford. And the way homelessness and people living in the streets and destitution across refugees and migrant communities apply largely come from the background where those people are largely deprived from the usual normal rights every citizen in a country enjoy. With regard to those people who come to this country, whether they have visitors visa, spouse visa, they come seeking for work, or they just visit and for whatever reason they can't leave the country and become undocumented, or those people who are granted leave to remain in the United Kingdom based on spouse, again, getting married, family life under the human rights and the rest. So this is the kind of people whom may be granted leave to remain in this country, but not right to access publicly funded services. Publicly funded services means housing allowances, means accessing universal credits or benefits. And those people, although they may have right to stay in this country, but they don't have right to access those services. So if they run out, they have right to work though. If they can't work for whatever reason, they become homeless, destitute, if there is no other support for them. Then in the area of migrants and refugees, there is a large group of those people. We know why this will come down to this country. They move around the globe. Those people who come here apply for asylum, for instance, and then the asylum claim finished, they go through the process, and then they are labeled as people with asylum rights exhausted. Then those people, many of whom cannot go back to their country of origin. For instance, people who come from Iran seeking asylum, we have a number of people who have been around for more than 10 years. But then again, their asylum rights exhausted. The government cannot send them back due to whatever difficulty they may have with the Iranian government and other regime. And then they are stuck. They can't have right to work. They can't have right to access publicly funded services, and they are blocked. They can't go back home. Then within these categories, those people whom but there is a way to deal with people who are labeled as an RPF, to change their condition if they are severely ill, or if we manage to get their immigration status right, to go through immigration process, which we have done in so many cases. I will go through a number of cases with you later. So that is where we can make a difference. And the fundamental thing is, as a community, as a society, as a country, we cannot afford to have innocent people whom just due to their immigration status, due to whether they have visa or not, to live destitute and homeless in our cities.
Thanks, Naveed. And Naveed, tell us a bit. You obviously can't talk about particular cases, but give us a sense of why these people have come here and why they can't go back. What kind of situations and traumas have they faced?
I've got a very difficult question, but easy for me to answer. I'm a refugee. I come from a refugee background. I was forced to leave my country. I had a family, I had life, I had job, I had everything. But just due to your political opinion, in my case, and belong to different interpretation of the way people are managed or governed, and the government imposing on people, you stand up for your rights, for the community rights, and then the government wouldn't tolerate you. In my case, I had to leave. I stayed far so long to the point where I could lose my life. So I moved out. I didn't want to come to the West, to the UK or to Europe. I stayed in the region. I come from Iran. I am Kurdish. I stayed in the region for a few years. I didn't want to leave, but the volatile environment in those regions had left no chance for me to survive. So I had to leave. And when I came to this country, I applied for asylum. Although I was a member of a political party, although Amnesty International knew about my case, although there were a couple of other organizations whom, through the political party I was working for, they sent information to the Home Office, but it took them 1.5 years before they offered me a status, 1.5 years. So with other people who come to this country, apply for asylum, go through a very complicated and complex immigration system here, and many of people who are there for many years and they don't even know what the system wants them to do. And then some of these people are just falling out of the system where they stay there for many, many years before the immigration finally manages whether to force them out, or they come across a point where they have to leave, or those people whom we manage through organizations like Asylum will come manage to normalize their status, to get them through the immigration system and get their rights to work, get their right to access to public funded services, whatsoever. So this is the kind of people that Asylum will come, another charity organization dealing with refugees and vulnerable migrants, come across and help with. I think it is quite important there are two groups here. One of these groups is the one whom are in limbo. They cannot do anything. They cannot produce further information because all the information they have produced up to now, they have forwarded to the immigration system. And some of whom are here, but due to the change of their circumstances, for instance, we had a guy who came from Bangladesh, and that guy became very ill suddenly. He came on a spouse visa, became very ill, and because he couldn't get access to benefit, housing, whatever, and he ended up having problem with the family because the wife also got help, got a mental health condition. So there was this conflict. He couldn't go back. The government couldn't push him back. He had 2 kids here. The wife was unwell. They were receiving benefit, but this guy was left out there. We supported this guy for more than 2 years in order to normalize his status, in order to help him to overcome the change his condition. And then during that period, what I intended to say, his mental health condition deteriorated so much that he didn't want to leave his room. So in that condition, when people are going through this complex immigration process, their health condition deteriorates so much that they lose their trust, they lose their confidence, and became so unwell that almost in some cases, no one can help them, to be honest.
Right. That's very, that gives us a great flavour of some of the issues people face. So I'm going to turn to Amy now. So Amy, you're kind of leading on the housing-led support part of this. So you're leading this people. Tell us about the kind of the ways that you are looking to support these.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon, everybody. So Connection Support are an organisation that's been around for 26 years in Oxfordshire. We also got services in Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. Our services are really designed to work alongside people to overcome life's challenges. So it fits in exactly with what this project is about, the whole ethos around, you know, supporting people. And the housing-led approach is about giving somebody a house first. It's, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's an obvious thing that people need to feel safe. They need to have warmth and shelter. And then we can look at the other issues which people need to deal with, such as the immigration that Naveed mentioned, and the mental health, and any sort of substance misuse, and any other services that traditionally this group wouldn't have been entitled to. But actually with our support, they can not necessarily achieve that entitlement, but we can signpost to organisations and work alongside those people to access those services.
And then I'm going to bring Paul Roberts in here as well now. So Paul, obviously providing accommodation, somewhere to live is, you know, this is about homelessness. This is the key part of what we're looking to do. Tell us about some of the challenges for sourcing accommodation for this group.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, I mean, Aspire's been in a position over the last 18 months of having brought online Housing First across the districts in partnership with local authorities and housing associations across the county. And we've been repurposing empty property to help meet housing needs and expanding a prevention service. So, and we've also been, you know, we are encouraging the idea that we need to look beyond our sector alone to tackle homelessness. I think we're helping to show that, you know, a housing-led approach is both possible, practicable and desirable, and it should be expanded and made the norm. So for this project, we're working with the landlord to ensure properties that are brought forward are fit for purpose and can be a home for the clients. That could be things like providing furniture, white goods and so on. and we'll work closely with Connections and Asylum Welcome to ensure their expert support is aligned with the housing available as best as possible. It's particularly challenging for adults who are currently labelled no recourse to public funds, because as explained previously, they're not entitled currently to housing benefit funding, and they have challenges to access paid employment. So being able to find a viable model that can work in the interests of the adult as well as in the interests of the landlord is particularly challenging.
Perfect. I'm conscious I'm watching time a bit. I want to make sure we leave time for questions, but there's a couple more things to cover. I mean, one thing I'd just shortcut and say for people, where are we with this project at the moment? And we're at the point where the population we're looking to serve is probably about 20 people who are in the emergency accommodation in this situation currently. And we've got sufficient funds and have been able to source some accommodation at a peppercorn rent to start with the first 6 of them. So that's happening now. So Amy's team is in place, and Naveed's team is already engaged with some of these people, and Paul is working on the accommodation. Our first next steps are really to get things moving for those people and to get it to work. But we're very conscious there's the remaining 14 people who we need to cover as well. So there's a continued fundraising and accommodation sourcing need for that, which we wanted to communicate today. But what I want to ask sort of each of you in turn now as well is just tell me what, as we set out on this project, what kind of excites you about it, and is there anything that worries you about it? And maybe I'll go back in the other order. So start with you, Paul, and then come to you, Amy, and you finish with you, Naveed.
Thanks, Neil. And in terms of what excites me, I think this project allows us to demonstrate that everyone can and should be housed with dignity and care, and that it's in all of our interests as residents and communities in Oxfordshire. So I'm excited by the prospect of, we can enable people currently labelled NRPF to be able to contribute in our communities if we give them the opportunity and support to do so. And I think that's particularly important to send that proactive message whilst this broader political picture feels less welcoming to migrants in our country. In terms of what worries me, as ever, it's finding the capacity of property to meet the demand that we know is there. So it's looking, the leadership of the likes of Soha Housing, who have come forward with the first 2-bed flats to this project on the peppercorn lease arrangement. It's finding more organisations, housing associations in particular, that can come forward and we can work with to really make this project a reality for as many NRPF clients as possible.
Great. Amy?
Yeah, I'd sort of echo what Paul sort of mentioned. What really excites me is actually to be part of something that is, quite different to anything that's ever previously been sort of delivered, because actually, as a voluntary sector, we are taking the approach that this cohort of people that traditionally haven't been able to access services have now got voice and they've got support. So I'm looking forward, or do look forward to that kind of growing and being actually an example of good practice to other areas around the country. And I've had conversations already with NACOM, and I know it's been mentioned up in Liverpool, the work that Oxfordshire are doing. So that's really exciting to be part of that. What worries me, I think it's the political agenda and really kind of society's perception of these people, and actually kind of breaking down those barriers and those perceptions.
Perfect. Naveed? Need to unmute?
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to go back to your previous question about where we are with this project. I'm so pleased to just let you know, a couple of hours ago, 2 teams, one from Asylum Welcome, one from our colleague at Connection, they met, and we have managed to identify those 6 people who are going to move to the project, which is a great step forward. And I'm so pleased with that one. And thanks to our colleague at Connection, which is great. Then to go back to your question, I just wanted to reflect on what Paul was saying. I don't want to repeat that one. That was great. And I think that is all we need. And I hope everyone in this part of the country will have the same attitude toward those people who are homeless, who are destitute, who are in our streets, and to deploy such a human, supportive and understanding approach is what we need. we are rich enough, we have enough money across this part of the country. If people could be generous as always to help us with this, we can lift those people off the streets forever. That's one thing. The challenge for me is about the immigration system in this country. And I think many of you are already now about Priti Patel's approach toward immigration and the new proposal. Hopefully that is not going to be the new act or law in this country. But if that's going to be, it will make the situation much more difficult than it is. But we are up there. We are going to face the challenges. And we are really looking forward to be working with you guys in order to tackle this problem in this part of the country. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you to all three of you. And as someone who's obviously a supporter of the project, I'm really pleased that we've got these three organisations working on the project. I think they're definitely the right ones, and it's great to see them working together. And it is ambitious, right? Where we want to get to with these people is to see them being able to become self-sufficient, contributing members of our society, and so we don't let that basically talent go to waste. So we're going to turn to some questions now, and I'm going to try to attempt to multitask and chair the session and read what the questions are as we go through. But I have got one for starters, and if someone has asked, what do people who've experienced homelessness think of, I guess, what they've heard today? And I know we do have some people from you might have heard people use the term the LEAF group. So we've a lived experience advisory forum has been set up as to provide a forum to give these people a voice. And I can see Nikki Aitchison on the line. I don't know if Rowan's on as well, but I'm going to put that question to you too, and give us a viewpoint from the perspective of people who've had a lived experience of homelessness.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. No, I suppose we can, like LEAF was sort of set up, and it was to enable people with lived experience to really be involved. And I think what's exciting about this as well, it's about collaboration and everybody doing this together. And it's just, I think it's fundamental that we get people with lived experience involved in this. And over the last sort of 6 months, 7 months, we have done quite a bit of work. So we worked with Neil and Amy and stuff around no recourse to public funds, as well as the feasibility study. And know the voice for everybody in any sort of way, but the people we have engaged with, a lot of people's sort of opinion on housing, led and housing first, is that probably people didn't know what that is, but what people want, like most people, and a lot of the themes, it was around somewhere that feels like a home. People want security, tenure, they want stability, they want control. People say around as well, like a lack of stigma and a lack of judgment, but also having privacy and space, so that you've got your own space and you feel that it actually feels like your home, instead of it being a transitional step-by-step sort of housing programme. People wanted consistent support and also peer support as well, and they wanted to feel that sometimes if they were having consistent support, they wanted to engage with somebody that they felt that they could relate with, either somebody that was a mentor or a staff member, or somebody with lived experience. And these were sort of quite common themes. And also as well, people, they wanted the time and space, but also it was the time and space, and this can sometimes be classed as no engaging, but people want the time and space, but when they're ready and they want it, to look at other stuff around sort of like employment, volunteering, education, and all these sort of other things that make any sort of transition on more sustainable as well. But I think it's about power, choice and control on the person, but having that stability. And they were most of the sort of the key themes that came out. So that was, I think, between 30 people that we engaged with, then another 15, and then other sort of forums that we've done and a few other projects as well. So we've still got a lot more work today, because we've definitely not engaged with anywhere near as many as we should be, but seeing the best practice around embedding some of the processes where we really do sort of engage people, listen, but then seeing positive outcomes, it's brilliant.
Great, thanks, Nikki. I've got another one here, Gillian. This one I think is for you. It's from the surname's truncated, so I won't try, but from Mark. The Homelessness Reduction Act charges local authorities to intervene early in the process of becoming homeless. So the question is, why then do most authorities still refuse to help families until they've been physically evicted from private rented property? So Gillian, I don't know if you have a comment on that. I don't know whether that's true in the case of Oxfordshire, and well, you heard the question. So.
Yeah, I mean, the spirit of the Act is if somebody comes forward or we know about somebody threatened with homelessness, then there should be a response, you know, even if it's well before the 56 days that homelessness will result, as the Act says. Because obviously the more upstream we can work, the more time we've got to prevent homelessness and try and keep somebody in their accommodation if that is safe and suitable, and also to, you know, have the time if somebody does need to move or be rehoused. I think it probably comes down to resources. So, you know, when you've got frontline teams under pressure or with high so-called caseloads, then they will be sifting out the higher priority, closer to homelessness people from the people who are further away from it. So sometimes that message may come across as, well, come back to us when you've actually got a Section 21 notice in your hand, rather than you feel the rumblings of a threat now, let's see what we can do. But, you know, in my conversations, whether it's Cherwell or the other Oxfordshire authorities, we would all be aiming to work before the 56 days and to avoid help, give people information, signpost to other agencies, let people know their rights, let people know when to come back to us if things escalate. Yeah, if that is people's experience, then it's disappointing, and I think we would all want to know about it.
Thanks, Gillian. There's still time for, if anyone wants to post another question, I think there's still time for maybe one more. Kate, I mean, you've probably been able to keep an eye on what's coming through better than me. I don't see any others at the moment, but you...
Gil has his hand up if you want to unmute them, and then...
I can't see that hand, but go ahead.
Sorry, hi, it's Sam Gill here. Some of you may already know me, we might have already spoken in the past, but
yes, Sam.
Hi, I just wanted to share just a few things really. I've never been in this environment dealing with homeless individuals before, but I'm a hotelier and a real estate guy. And since the pandemic, I gave my hotels to the homeless, and I've been dealing with the homeless individuals since that period. And to me, it's been a very touching experience, a very humbling experience. And since then, I've been trying to think of ways of how I could play a larger part to help eradicate the situation. And some of the things that I've been thinking about, and I've had various conversations with some high-level CEOs from some FTSE 100 companies, and we've opened a sort of a forum of conversation. And one of the things that we came up with was to create a homeless homes fund, bringing private investors in, and bringing charities and bringing government together to formulate this fund, and to buy real estate for homeless individuals. But I have to say, it's been such a difficult task in trying to find someone that can talk to us about it, that can, you know, give us the experience from the requirements, from the homeless point of view. From the finance point of view and the organizational point of view, we have that experience, but that side of it has been very difficult. And you know, I've tried for months, and we haven't quite got where we want to be able to formalize a strategy for these individuals. And so, you know, any advice, any help, that would really make a big difference for us. But just as a bit of an experience and a bit of a background, I'm now housing. I've got 40 rooms in Berkshire and South Oxfordshire. Unfortunately, I had that building. I used it for homeless. It's no longer there anymore now. But in Berkshire, I've got 40 rooms, and you know, we've managed to house about 30 of them in permanent housing, some of them in my own homes that I own and I've housed permanently. I also have a stage 2 pathway drug rehabilitation unit, which I set up since understanding this whole agenda. So I've kind of really taken this by 2 arms, you know, and hugged the whole agenda, but I just need some help, some advice to see what somebody from the private sector can do to help this agenda. So I open it up to you all.
Well, thanks, Sam. We definitely need to continue that conversation. I've seen in the chat actually, probably a new connection is Lígia, and I think that's probably a great, because it gives you a kind of a national point of contact and someone who's pretty well networked into into the systems and looking at solutions for homelessness. So I'm sure Lígia will follow up on that. I think you've put your details in the chat, haven't you, Lígia, to make that connection. And yeah, we should definitely follow up on that. I think time now, I don't know, I'm looking at Adrian's anxiety level, but it's probably almost time to hand back to you, Adrian, to summarise and to wrap up so that we finish on time. But thanks everybody for listening to that section, and thanks Adrian for the opportunity to talk through it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Neil, and thank you Oxfordshire Homeless Movement for co-hosting the webinar today, and the great leadership you're bringing. And thank you to Jane, who I know is here somewhere and has been active in the chat box. Sorry we haven't had time to pick up all the comments and all the conversations, but we will. You can download the chat box yourself if you click on the chat and click on the 3 dots at the bottom. You can save chat onto your own computer, but we tend to pick up on the points raised in the chat and address them through the feedback after the webinars anyway. So yeah, thank you Neil and OHM. Thank you to Lígia, our speaker. Thank you to Gillian for making time to talk to us about the work of the councils. Thank you Naveed, Amy and Paul for a really interesting discussion, and thank you to all of you for making the time today to come along to another really interesting webinar. We will be back on the 30th of June at the same time to talk about growing the youngest minds in a pandemic. Now many of us are talking about getting back to the new normal. For the youngest minds, the last year has been the normal. So what the changes mean for them, what the impacts are going to be on them, is something we will be exploring at the next webinar. I very much look forward to seeing you all then. And in the meantime, please do reach out in many directions, but I'm always happy to talk to people and connect. So thank you for making